Dr. Ray, thank you so much for being on Drinking with Gin today.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
We always start every episode with what are you drinking? Are you
hmm
drinking anything as we chat today?
I have a very plain gray cup that has healthy water in it.
I
That's
love it.
it.
I love
Yeah.
it. I was just downing a bunch of water. I'm drinking like this little sparkling pink grapefruit club soda. It's either like a club soda or a tonic. I don't know, but it's good. I just wanted a little something refreshing. It's still really hot here in Minneapolis, so I was feeling a little something refreshing. So, Jem, whatever you're listening to or drinking as you're listening along to this conversation, I'm so excited about this. So, I just finished reading your book this morning, which we were originally going to record this morning and we had a scheduling conflict. And I was like, oh, I'm so glad I had that little bit of extra time because I got to finish the whole thing, which was great.
hmm
And it's called All It Takes Is One. So you're going to want to grab them. I'm going to put the link in. Thank you. The beautiful cover. I'm going to put a link in the show notes so that you can grab a copy. It's great. I burned through it. And I always think that's a really good sign, a really good indicator that you're like, okay, what's next? I want to keep going. Like, what's more? And also the way it's structured. Like, if you like lists, and things to follow along on that are like well organized, this is for you because
Wow, you got it. It's and on Amazon, you'll see the reviews. They say the same thing. They say it's like it guides you. It's structured in a way to understand it in
yeah,
a very simple way.
I really, really felt that. And so, I obviously gave the bio and the work that you do, which was really great. I want to talk before we dive into some of the methodologies and kind of some of our ideas like around coaching and self-improvement and transformation, all of that. Um, I want to dive into a little bit of like your own story and what kind of sent you personally on this own path. Cause I've been very open about my story. I share it here all the time on Drinking with Gin, on stages, on the podcast and my book. Um, you had two near death experiences. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Can you tell, was that the catalyst or was there something else besides that?
There are a lot of things that I experienced in my childhood, and I probably brought those up, particularly in my book, because yes, it's interesting, and also I feel it was the catalyst for me to recognize that there's much more than this human experience. So early on in my age, I connected to spirit through an accident. The first time I almost died. I fell 3 stories and was gone for about a minute and a half. At least that's what the friends told me. And I remember going into this cocoon of like warmth, and I remember seeing kind of ghostly characters, their spirit, and then it almost felt like right away I came right back out. But according to my friends, it was a while. So it was just like that. And I didn't have anyone to talk to about it. I was I guess you'd say I just, I didn't know I was dead. But then like in the 70s, a movie came out that talked about near-death experiences. In a lot of the people who were sharing their experience described exactly what I saw. And that's when I realized that, oh, I was gone and I came back. So that's why I brought that up. But how I really got into this work was like most of us who strive to move in a particular direction to attract the man or woman, to attract the money, the house, social currency, to have that respect and to be liked, we go in a particular direction, whether it's a right map or not. And through that experience of trying to get to point B, I just kept bumping up against myself, such as when I started making money, I spent it on stupid things. I claimed bankruptcy at a very young age. Like I was 26 at the time, to I was partying, not like drinking all the time, but I would take my friends out and I was making pretty good money, and through that lifestyle I developed IBS. So I started seeing holistic doctors to help me with that. but it was more like I was in my way, and I was that typical young man who was just working hard, going in a certain direction, not truly connected to spirit and my emotions. So my physical body humbled me. I have an IBS for 13 years. I healed myself from that to just chaotic relationships to I ended up getting a DUI, and the DUI sent me to see a counselor. Well, the courts did. It was mandated, and the counselor Jim said, I don't know if you have a drinking problem, Ray, but you do create a lot of problems when you drink, and that led to getting therapy, and yeah, just more and more, like a lot of us, it's like while you're starting to investigate, trying to understand ourselves, we start picking up books, we start reading them. And then more and more, I got really into this. And then um, I started, I became an apprentice for Dr. Morris Netherton. And he took me under his wings I would say almost like his own son. And we traveled the world, and we worked with psychologists, psychiatrists, teaching his method. He had a very specific type of method that he formulated, and the rest is just what's become of me. I mean, there's more to it, but we would need a lot more time to talk about that. But that's, I guess, the 4-minute version of how I got where I'm at.
Thank you for sharing that. One of the things I'm so passionate about right now is connecting with men that are willing to be open and vulnerable about what they've been through. I just think it's something that we need in the world right now so much.
Mhm.
And so thank you for sharing that. Interestingly enough, my last meeting right before this was with my financial advisor, and we were
Mhm.
having that conversation about like how we spend money as we get older is so different. Like the value that we put on things and material things, and how we value experiences so much more. And don't get me wrong, I like nice things, but like it's a very different, concept. And I'm sure you had to learn a really hard lesson, like you said, filing for bankruptcy at 26 years old. Sometimes people get this, you start making all this money and it's like spend, 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 and keeping up with the Jones and, getting this thing and that thing. And something else that you said in there that really resonated, which is so funny that you didn't say it exactly this way, but you kind of said it in a way that my number one takeaway of like reading your book and looking at what you do is that you help people get out of their own way. And
Mhm.
that's kind like you said something about like I was getting in my own way. And I'm like, oh, that was like kind of like if
Mhm.
I were to give it a tagline, it's like you help people get out of their own way.
Mhm. Absolutely, because we all have these hidden beliefs and thoughts we have about what a person might be thinking or why is it that they didn't call us back. And often we'll find out that their phone was dead or they meant something else, and yet we put ourselves through hell with the way we uh, perceive the information, and nothing's happening outside ourselves. And if that person has no idea what's going on, they're going on with their day, and yet here we are in our own little cave that we've created this idea that this is where we belong, or there is a problem when there was originally nothing there.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah,
think that's
that's
one of the
the
most dangerous places is that place of uncertainty, because that's when our brains and our minds start making up stories in our heads, right?
Mhm.
Like to fill in the blanks, to fill in the spaces. And oftentimes those stories that we make up in our heads are not accurate at all.
Yeah, well, a lot. Well, what I see more in the Western culture is that there might be more of a propensity to logically think our way out of it when it might be something more emotional or even an overstimulated nervous system. Because I have, after 5 o'clock at night, I perceive text messages like more work. And more and often, if I experience that resistance in my body, I won't, unless it's absolutely urgent, I'll get to it the next morning. And when I get to the next morning, I'm like, oh, it's more matter of fact. It was more what I was feeling. I had a long day. I start at 5 a.m. every day. So Sometimes it could be just that.
Yeah. You mentioned that you had developed IBS in these physical situations. And I am a huge believer in the psychosomatic effects of trauma, difficulty, challenges, things that we're going through in our lives. Like when I was going through a traumatic time in my life, I got abnormal skin cancer cells.
Hmm.
My hair broke off and fell out, and I got shingles on my face in my 30s. And that was like my body's reaction to the stress. And it's like sometimes when you're in it, when
Hmm.
you're in that time, it's like you can't see it in the moment. And then it becomes so crystal clear in the rear
Hmm.
view mirror. And you're like, oh, well, that's why that was happening. And you in the book give a lot of different examples about that. And so it's so interesting, like that you developed, like you said, IBS, and you've been able to, heal yourself of that and no longer struggle with that particular issue. Is that something that you see a lot with your clients that you work with in terms of having physical ailments that are developing as from emotional duress, from mental strain, from these situations that they're going through in their lives?
Absolutely. I don't necessarily address people's health issues. However, their health issues always have some correlation to what they're experiencing in their life, to the patterns that they keep recreating, to even how they see the world. As an example, uh, IBS, if you look it up in the Louise Hay book, You Can Heal Your Life, which I also mentioned in my book, it says that it has to do with having issues with letting go, control issues. I
Mm.
was extremely controlling. People will ask me, well, what worked? How did you heal that? And my response is, I changed my diet. Um, I I started moving around a little bit more, and I addressed my emotions. You have to do it all. And I had this fear of like that things were not going to work out. I didn't trust the process of life. Therefore, I was hanging on to my poop. And hands down, almost every person I've worked with, whether they're constipated or they just have diarrhea all the time, those people, like 98% of the time, have control issues. So
Mm.
I've seen it. Or when I passed my kidney stone and I didn't meet the criteria for a person to develop that based off my diet. However, I had just divorced my wife and I was pissed off. If you look that up as well, it's connected to being with resentment, anger. So when I did pass the kidney stone, I was also aware of it, what I was letting go of. So while I was in pain, I did self-hypnosis. I was able to release that, the stone, but also the emotions and the attachments and the anger maybe I had toward my wife. Because the thing is that if I were to go to the hospital and they helped me release the stone, but emotionally I was still clinging to things, there's a good chance I would get a second, third, or fourth
Hmm.
stone. And I've seen that with people. I've seen over 6,000 clients. I've done over 20,000 sessions. So I see people's lives. I'm a believer not because someone gave me a book. I'm a believer because I experienced it with clients and myself. So absolutely, there's always a somatic connection. Always.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Like I said, it's sometimes it's hard to see. So it's nice to have somebody like you who can be like, okay, this is a repetitive pattern that we see with this
Mhm.
type of situation. And to help bring clarity to people. I mean, like in the moment, like I knew something was wrong. Like I knew that I shouldn't be having shingles on my face in my
Mhm.
30s. Like I knew that that was not normal, but it didn't become really clear until I almost like removed myself from that abusive situation to
Mhm.
begin to go, oh, okay, that's what was going on here. And like, these are the things to do moving forward. And so on that note, we were kind of chatting a little bit beforehand and, we were talking about like our experiences, right? Like I was telling you, I went through a traumatic experience, like when I got the shingles on my face and everything.
Mhm.
It was in a relationship with, I don't know what to label him as, a sociopath, a psychopath, a narcissist, maybe all three of them. I was completely deceived, bamboozled, betrayed. Like it was wild. And it did then bring light to why I chose him. Why, like, I did inner child work. I did the meditation retreats. I tapped into myself. I've done all of the work. I do still say, that I believe we can be victims of certain abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, psychological, mental, all of that. But because you talk about this a little bit in your book, I actually feel like quite a lot. Um, and so I want to get a little bit of your perspective on being a victim of something, of a behavior, of a treatment, of an experience versus living in victim mentality. And
Okay.
is there a difference? How, like, I want to hear your take on it, because I think that this part I think can be a really interesting, conversation, because like I said, you help people get out of their own way.
Yes. Well, I'm going to answer that, but when you were talking, I Googled something about shingles and I put it in the chat and it says shingles, waiting for the other shoe to drop, fear and tension, too sensitive.
Huh.
So I don't know if that resonates with you, but that's what came up.
That first sentence for sure.
Yeah.
Like waiting for the other shoe to drop. Like I knew something was wrong. Like I knew that my life was
Mhm.
in turmoil. It was in chaos. Um, I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have, because I was being gaslit and
Mhm.
manipulated. And so I felt like I was going crazy, right? Like I
Mhm.
literally felt like I was going crazy when things would happen and I would try to address them. It would always get turned back on me, or I was told that it didn't happen, even though it actually did.
Mhm.
And so it was almost like it was when I got the evidence. It was like I needed the actual hardcore evidence, and should have been trusting my own gut and intuition all along. And that was a big part of my own journey, was because I'm a very intuitive person. That was a big thing for me, was going back to tapping into trusting myself.
And you probably can see as well now, particularly as a coach, that if you had not gone through that experience, not that you'd want it again, you would have not developed better trust for yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's a whole lot more, but yes.
Yeah, but of course there's a part of you like saying, uh, I wish 10, 15 years ago I could have meditated and moved into my parallel reality of who I am now, just so I could have avoided some of that bullshit and not listening to my intuition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote down some notes here for that question you asked, and I'm going to break it down in three ways. Uh, if it's, I don't know, maybe they're all tied together, but the first one is like if someone punches me in the face, I can say I'm a victim of violence, like someone actually did something to me. But if I were to walk around now and believe that I'm always going to be hit by people from just that one experience, then I could be carrying the victim mentality. You know what I mean? I might just start look at life and people with mistrust. You know, they're going to betray you. You never know what's going to happen. So there's the trauma, and then what happens after that, and that is where I'm not safe. And a lot of people who have that victim mentality, if they felt more trust, they wouldn't have that. So I don't ever work with a client or even people and go, stop being a victim. It's actually the opposite of that. It's how can I help elicit more trust in your heart? What can we do for you to create a new narrative about life that serves you? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one is where the way the person continues to think about it to the degree that there's no way it could expand. And what I mean by that is this, working with a woman who was perpetrated by an uncle when she was younger. And uh, instead of recognizing hurt people, she keeps going into the idea he should have known better. He was older. He owes me an apology. Well, as you know, thinking about that way doesn't heal her. In fact, it even makes her feel like that he was aware that he was actually perpetrating her, hurting her, which even makes it worse. Rather than recognizing again, hurt people hurt people. So by the way she keeps paying attention to what needs to get done, such as he should have known better, or that she's owed an apology, she doesn't allow herself to take personal responsibility and do whatever work to heal it anyway. So she's stuck with that. So some people, and most people don't know this, but I worked with them, that if you've ever been around homeless people who are also psychotic, and it sounds like they're talking to someone, which they might see that person or hear that person, if you listen really carefully, oftentimes what you'll hear is what had happened to them.
Hmm.
They're just playing it out. So I worked I worked with some people, like people who are homeless who were in boarding homes, and yeah, a lot of that talk you would hear was what they have not integrated. And so instead of integrating it to make sense of it and move forward in your life, I don't know for what reason, that it just kept percolating and whatever, and it became part of their psyche to where they can no longer get that experience or those voices out of their head. Now, people listening to this, I'm not saying this is the case for all people, and nor am I saying like there's like scientific proof behind this. However, I'm just sharing that I've heard, like my experience is this: if you don't talk about it, then it just festers. And the worst case scenario is where you actually re-experience it over and over again. Similarly, like the Fisher King, like the Robin Williams character who witnessed his wife being shot with a shotgun. And then if you see this movie from in the 90s, he becomes homeless. He was like a professor before this had happened. He loses his mind and he keeps replaying the experience. There's a happy ending, but the point is that if we don't integrate this, it will show up in our lives forever.
Yeah. So I think where I struggle with a little bit in that, and this, I told you there was something where I was like, ooh, we're going to have an interesting dialogue about this, because I don't think, so from my perspective, if someone is perpetrated by an adult when they're a child, and I understand the concept of that hurt people, but that also doesn't make it okay.
Mhm.
And that doesn't excuse their actions, right? Like, we've both been hurt, but we don't then go out and damage other people, right? So we all have choices. And I think it's okay to acknowledge that behavior is unacceptable and inappropriate. And then and I also don't think that you need an apology from somebody who's probably never going to give you an apology. I don't think you need an apology to heal or to transform your life. But that's, I think, the one piece that I was kind of struggling with is like, if someone has been damaging to you, I think it's okay to say, no, that behavior is bad, but I can't control their behavior. I can only control mine. Is that, are we more aligned if we kind of say it that way? And not that we have to be aligned.
Well,
I
what
don't
was
think that's
interesting is
necessary.
that you went to the story or interpretation as if I might think that behavior is okay. Am I
No, I don't think
like
that you're condoning
oh,
it. I don't,
okay.
I definitely didn't.
So okay, yes, I wasn't sure about that, but um, the thing is that whenever I worked with people who still have not fully healed whatever the trauma was, and the longer it is, the deeper it is. The longer it is, there's also probably a lot more self-judgment, such as why didn't I get out of it? To why didn't I listen to my friends? To it's what I mean. The longer it is, there's the there's the propensity for that person to kind of go, I was stupid, I was dumb, to then also recognizing I was really manipulated. This was really a nasty bastard, like, and so I can understand that dynamic, and to where it's just like, you weren't there, you didn't hear the things he said. He lied to me in all of those stories. I've worked with over 500 women who've been raped. So I've been right there. I've worked with ritualistic abuse. We're talking about children who are tortured. I've worked with the most difficult stuff. And so I kind of I understand because I'm not in it, I for sure as a coach couldn't say, hey, it wasn't a big deal, or hey, just have different thoughts. But again, like you said, what you take away from it is everything. Who you become is everything. And there's something that my mentor told me, Dr. Netherton, when I was working with someone who had borderline personality disorder. And this person I did 2 sessions with, and it was at a clinic. In the second session, there was a couch, and I had her lie down and do some breath work. It was the first time she went really deep and actually had a major breakthrough. She seemed to really like me, and yeah, it was great work. And then the following week, I got the flu, and I couldn't see her, and she actually took it personally, and we kind of got in a strange argument over the phone, and she couldn't understand that I couldn't show up. But people who have borderline tendencies have really poor boundaries. Secondly, they can go from 2 extremes, praising you to making you out to be the perpetrator. And she called the clinic and she reported me to my supervisor. But she didn't say I did anything weird, but she talked about how she now was uncomfortable with just lying on a couch. And it's in a clinic where there's other people there. It's like she wasn't alone in my apartment or something, So, and I was shocked. Like, why is it that like she would do that when she praised me? And I called my mentor, who wasn't my supervisor, I had a different one. And he said, Ray, why is she there? I said, well, she's mentally ill. And he says, yeah. And I said, why would she do that? And he asked, do you think she's confused? I says, yes. He says, well, the more you try to make sense out of confusion, you'll be confused. The more you try to make sense out of confusion, you'll be confused. So take what I just shared. When you project onto a man or anyone who you are, such as you have integrity, you're empathetic, you always take the higher road, you're kind, you have a track record of always being loving, it will never make sense that man's motive. And the more you try to think about why he did that, or why didn't he just walk away, or any of that, a person will feel confused. And when you're confused, you're not integrated. So it's important to be able to, we're not accepting the behavior. It's more like, I don't want to give this person or relationship any more thoughts. He doesn't deserve my time. He doesn't deserve my energy. He's confused. And when I think about him this way, I get confused. So I'm going to step back and just work on myself. Have talks to myself that make sense and that are healing. So that's more my approach to understanding maybe a perpetrator.
So it's more like, don't let that experience or that person define you, because that's not what does. It's more about taking that experience and then moving forward from it so that you can become more yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
I love that. No, that's great. And like I said, we have like, as I was reading and even as we've been chatting, it's like, there's so many, synchronicities and, similarities. So we talked a little bit about that, the forgiveness piece and the personal responsibility, right? Because it's
so wait a minute. Did I say that in my book also? You don't have to forgive someone? Do you remember me?
I don't know. That was just my own thing. I have it down here as something that I wanted to talk to you about.
Yeah. Let me share that for a second.
Yeah, I would love to
in my
hear.
book, I put that in there. I say, just know you basically you don't have to forgive someone, okay? But if anything, it's maybe recognizing your own pain in a situation, recognizing your own needs in a situation first. And from that compassion, maybe you can recognize that um, the forgiveness that is needed is for yourself and what you allowed yourself to put yourself through.
I'm
That's
so glad you said that, because if you didn't, I was going to say the only person you need to forgive is yourself. Because
yes,
I know, like in my own situation, it was like, how the hell did I let this happen? How did
yeah,
I, of all, like, I'm smart, I'm, diligent, I'm vigilant. Like, how did I let this happen? How did I accept this into my life? And like, then you start to do the self blame. So it's like you kind of have to forgive yourself. That's why I did some inner child work. And I was like, okay, I can go back and forgive that little 4-year-old girl for, who I kind of let myself become, who I surrounded myself with. And you know what I can do now is I can make changes. I can be in the present. I can't change the past, but I can change today and today moving forward. And that's it. And
yeah.
I think you talk a lot about that personal responsibility. And so I
Mhm.
just want to say for a second, I do think when I was reading in the beginning of the book, I maybe misinterpreted a little bit of that. And I told you that, as I was reading and finished the book this morning, I was like, wait, I actually think that we're saying the same thing
Mhm.
in a different way. But like, I think I needed to process it. And I wanted to like chat that conversation out with you because I wanted to hear more of how you meant it versus how I interpreted it. And I think that's the power of communication, right? And having this dialogue. And that's another thing that you talk about is healthy relationships and being able to have conversations to move things forward.
Yes, I think the most powerful thing that any of us could embody for us to look at life and people and situations that don't meet our expectations or in the moment we think go wrong is that here's life, here are people that I maybe don't have control over, but above all that is God, higher power, and spirit. And if I'm on purpose and I'm present, then all things happening in my life are not happening to me, but with me. So if it's happening with me, how do I get the best learning from that experience? How do I integrate that so my consciousness could really expand? And as an example, too, I heard this a couple days ago. Someone was interviewing RFK Jr. And she said, how is it that you stay positive when you have so much backlash, including from your family? What is it that you connect to? Because he's getting a lot of heat. And he said, I have a spiritual commitment. I meditate. He's like, I have a spiritual commitment to God. And so, that's like his overarching purpose in this. So no matter what, even as a good person and with good intentions, we offend people. People project onto us. So, when moving forward in life, we need to have a healthy, you know, life uh, life philosophies that serve us, help us, and hopefully those philosophies help us contribute to society. Because a lot of what we think, which if you read in that book, uh, they're programs. There's a chapter where it talks about the main 11 influencers. And so, as an example, a woman might not feel she's worthy because she's in her 50s and never had a baby. It might be a man who feels unworthy because he's 42 years old and he doesn't own his own house. I mean, people make up these strange stories, but we as a society have created these narratives of like, this is what makes you an attractive, worthy person through TV and film. So there's a lot for us to look at on this planet and go, oh my God, like I'm not there, or I'm never going to be like that. There's so much tension and misinformation that it's very important for us to be able to stay in the eye of a hurricane and in our hearts and on purpose, whatever that might look like in our lives.
I love that. And because that you actually already kind of proactively talked about all of this, because as you know, a lot of people are here for the narcissism content.
Yeah.
And you touched on a few different things like chaos, creating confusion. Those are things that narcissists love to do, because if you're constantly confused or living in chaos, there's no opportunity to actually sit and be in the present. And you talk so much about that. Like, I love that saying of like sitting in the eye of the hurricane so that you can be present and connect. And if you're not present, you're just missing out on everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, there's, about the narcissist piece, like I've worked with a lot of women who've met men who are this way that you might describe. And most women don't really know how to date so they can weed out these men. Of course, that if a woman has that energy that attracts that, of course, they're going to maybe play out that dance. However, these are certain things that I'm going to share with you, and you might go, oh my God, I should have known that, or women like this. And that is like, number one, if you're going to meet a man and he talks about his exes as if they're bitches and it's their fault, run. Number two, if he talks about his parents as if they're still assholes and at least he hasn't, you don't have to like your parents, but you would hope the man would come to a place of like forgiving them and like, I just don't talk to him a whole lot. That's a red flag if they're talking about their parents, like they still haven't healed that. Three, that they really are not happy with their careers, because what they're going to do is they're going to focus on the relationship. Therefore, when you're not on, it's your problem. It's the way, if they're not doing any like self-development, like anything, then there's a good chance they're not introspective. And therefore, their excitement is only in a moment of what you give to them, and it's an appetite you never can fulfill. I can keep going down this list. My girlfriend's a coach, and she called it the 10 red flags to look at, and these are things that I notice that women maybe will not necessarily pay attention to. Like women, I feel, need to pay attention more to a man's action over his words. Look at his action. Look at his action. And if he says, I'm just going through this, it's situational, it's just this period in my life, why are you waiting for the person's potentiality? That's why they call it dating. Move forward. There are already men out there. And so, yeah, the boundary thing with boundaries have always been a big issue with women who attract narcissists. Always.
For sure. Yep.
Always.
And I think that's a big part of like the journey is sometimes you need that big event to happen so that you can understand all the other underlying issues, right? Like I developed unhealthy coping mechanisms because I grew up in a narcissistic family. And so to me, that was normal. I didn't know that it wasn't normal until I had been so deeply impacted by it and everything blew up. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm almost 40 years old. This is not normal, right? And then you do kind of the learning and that whole journey. And even just like being around that type of personality, I do think it's so important who you spend your time around. Because it's like we were talking about the material things earlier. Like if you're around people all the time and that's what matters, it's like always this, competition, a race to keep up, right? Until you get your own priorities straight and you kind of stop adapting to your environment, get to know who you really are and move. Because you and I have both been on this similar journey, and I want to hear about your journey of moving from living in ego to moving to living in heart. And that was one of the things that really stood out to me in your book. And so I want to hear about your journey and kind of how you went about that and like how you recognized the signs of needing to make that change too.
Well, I am still going through the process and we never stop, but it's a lot easier for me. So as an example, I'll just talk about something that I was going through recently, like the last 3 days, and it feels resolved. And then I'll get to how I got here. So I live in Ashland, Oregon right now, and I will be moving to Asheville in June, okay? And it's a lot slower here. It's way too slow for me. And I have identified myself as a person who's always in motion. I have very fiery energy. I like to create and produce things. Like I love that. I love that. So I have a lot of energy. And I've been kind of quiet, like in hibernation for the last 4 years since 2020. And so I noticed that. Like I remember talking to my girlfriend and saying I should be doing this. I'm Dr. Ray. Like I just wrote a book and all of this. That was my ego, basically saying that in that moment I wasn't enough and that there was more to do. And this is recently because the book just came out in April. And here I got signed, I got a publishing deal. You would think someone would celebrate and think that's enough. And it was with the people who did Chicken Soup for the Soul. So that's a pretty big thing. But it wasn't enough because it's like I was going to do all these other things after the book launch, but I actually got sick. And then I went on 4 vacations in the summertime. And it was a very restful summer. In fact, it was the most fun I ever had being a father. So I wasn't supposed to work. I was supposed to receive the fruits of my efforts. But if my ego would have taken over, I would have been pushing it. I wouldn't have been happy. So I just let it go. And I had the best summer. So that's an example where, when we are not content with where we are, and when we have that part of ourselves thinking we should be doing more, that's the ego. We're separate from the moment. We're separate from God. We're separate from the gifts that exist in that moment. So the way I probably got here, as far as this way of thinking, was, again, I've made a lot of money and I've lost it. So you would hope I'd learn my lesson. I have been in relationships and many of them ended in the same way. I'm not going to share those details, but I recognized that was something I needed to work on. So if I'm going to attract a woman, I need to work on myself because I keep attracting the same type of woman. It's not her, it's me. So I'm in a beautiful relationship right now with a woman who does her work. I learned it through even being with an amazing woman and having moments where I'm thinking about how she could be doing something better or that there's a problem. And to have a woman, my girlfriend right now, who's Nicole, who does her work and she's such a beautiful, pure light, is where there's really nothing she can't do that's wrong. I mean, literally, she's a really great person. And she doesn't come back at me, meaning like where we always hold it in a very respectful container. So even when I have those moments of those thoughts, or I'm in mid-sentence, there's some part of me that recognizes that, wait a minute, I didn't sleep today. Wait a minute, I've been stressed lately. Wait a minute, this is my nervous system and ego running the show. I'm going to shut up. Yeah.
So it's that ability to, again, like be present. And I do this little acronym called ROR.
Mm-hmm.
So you react, but then you have the self-awareness to observe your reaction so you can modify your response.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of, I feel like what you were just talking about, because our reactions are more of like those hardwired based on maybe our limiting beliefs, like you talk a lot about. But if we have that self-awareness to be able to observe them and go, oh, this is why I reacted that way, and sometimes take the ownership, right? And have the humility to be like, oh gosh, I reacted this way. I'm so sorry. That's not how I meant to. Let's, kind of go back to that so that you can start to rewire yourself so that you don't react that way in the future and you have more of a response.
Yes. Yes. You said hardwire. Are you a Joe Dispenza fan?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But is that something that he talks a lot about?
He basically describes the neural net as being plastic. It can change. However, if you reinforce the feelings, the beliefs, it does create that kind of hard wire, and by being able to relax the nervous system, it softens it so you could be more open and receptive. This, if you have a client working with you and they're really angry, You're not going to go, hey, let's drop into meditation and I'm going to share some, guided imagery, for you. You're like, no, you want to first connect, relate, and hopefully maybe do some breath work just so they can calm themselves, but they're not open yet.
Yeah.
And so
You don't just
with
tell them stop being angry. I'm just kidding.
there, there's this book, I mean, a movie called Bigger Than Life with God, what is his name? Bill Murray, and he is a motivational speaker. And I think the name of his book is Just Get Over It. It's supposed to be kind of like a sarcastic spin
Yeah.
on a motivational speaker that actually is probably a little more apathetic, but just get over it.
Well, and I think that it's actually a really important topic. Like I have a very vivid memory from being 5 years old, and I was told my sister had been in a horrific car accident. We walked into the hospital. Her and I are really close. She's like 13 years older than me. So she always was like, babysitting me, caring for me. Like we've always had kind of this more like mother-daughter relationship almost, or like kind of a caregiver, caretaker. And so I was devastated walking in and seeing her and all these contraptions and in casts and surgery. Like it was, and an adult told me, Jenny, don't cry. And you talked about this, like how we have to, like, I'm a huge fan of cognitive diffusion, where you
Mhm.
have to acknowledge and process your emotions so
Mhm.
that you can decide how you want to feel, because your thoughts create your feelings and your feelings shape your mood. And then your mood becomes your reality. And we do not give ourselves enough credit for how much we can actually control this.
Yes, absolutely. And if you were to tie that into that same process with, say, something that had happened or that asshole guy, it's recognizing that I still generate a feeling when I think about him. I don't know why, but it's there. It's mine. Or the moment I think about the shouldas, couldas, I have resistance. Okay, I am not going to give that story or him any more of my time. Let me feel
Yeah.
that. What does this feeling feel like? Where is it? It's in my solar plexus. Oh, it's the feeling that I didn't step into my power. All right. Okay, there she is. All right. All right. I had a moment I wasn't feeling empowered. And that's where you want to go. That's what I mean. It's like for example, when I have my first breakthrough session with my clients, I do a full-on assessment, such as their childhood and most of their traumas, which they feel have influenced their life. But when they talk about their father, mother, and other stories, I just want the quick story. I just want, dad wasn't there, blah, blah, blah. That's all I want because I want to be able to put it in the client's body. Where do they really feel still about that? What is still stuck there versus the story up here? But that at least gives me a map for us to like figure out where we want to go. But I will spend very little time on, say, not calling anyone's dad an asshole, but let's say I spend very little time on asshole dad, but more, what did you take away from that? What did it feel like to not be seen? What was it like to not feel safe in your home? To what were the things you want to say to him? If you were to tell him, fuck off, can you do that right now? Like I go there with that client. It's not so much what he did anymore. It's more about what can I do still today about this? And
Yeah.
even if she or he sounds judgmental and they talk about that person like they haven't healed it at all, I don't give a shit. I'm actually happy they feel safe to not talk about dad or mom and feel guilty about it. I feel great for them that they're able to finally speak up about this. And in time working with me, we'll get to that place that they recognize maybe it's not important. Hurt people hurt people. Or
Yeah.
my dad had a shitty dad also, but it doesn't excuse it. I could repeat what he did, but I'm not, you know, but
Yep.
it's like you start seeing it differently. So you can step back and start working on yourself.
Yeah. Breaking that like generational trauma,
Trauma. Yep.
and also not projecting or trying to tell somebody how they should feel about something. In my first TV interview after I launched my first book, one of
Mm.
the news anchors was like, "Oh, you must hate this guy." And I was like, "I'm indifferent." Like
Mhm.
I'm indifferent towards him. And she was kind of taken aback by that,
Mhm.
right? Like, because people would think like because of what he did that I probably do hate him. I don't. Like I just don't care. Like he has no impact on my life anymore. And I'm quite, like I'm not ever going to probably say thank you, but it launched me a whole new career, a whole new life. I'm a better, I'm the person that I always was, but I live authentically as me now. And
That's amazing.
that's like just like a big shift. Okay, so I know we could talk for hours, I feel like. And again, like I said, we have so many similar things. We talk a lot about affirmations and intentions. I call them intentions, you call them affirmations. It's important to do that. You talk about vision boards, you talk about meditation, being in nature. These are all really cool things. I want to introduce, kind of briefly a couple of things that you have that are strategies that I was not familiar with. So I want to bring those to our family here on Drinking with Gin so that people can kind of tap into some new strategies. Your tree exercise.
Hmm.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that? What you do? Like, you can even just give us a high level, like how you use that with people, because I can see so much value. I was like, this makes so much sense. Like, why have I not heard of this before? So, I want to talk a little bit about that. And then we can maybe finish with your collective release ceremony, because that was another new tool, new strategy that you share in your book as one of the things that you do with your clients. And so I want to talk about those two things, and then we'll direct people to go get the book, connect with you so that they can continue to learn from Dr. Ray.
Thank you. By the way, you're very organized with how you deliver, and it's really cool to keep everything on track. And I really appreciate you
Oh,
for that.
thank you.
The tree exercise and the collective release exercise, I actually have it spoken and it's on YouTube, like, or you can go to it on my website. So after we get off this call, I'll send those to you. So people might not want to get the book, but they might want to have the experience, or they can have both.
Cool.
So in a book, it's also I have written in there that if you want an audio version of this, go here, and the audio versions are, or it's a video, but it's me talking, but there's no graphics or anything else. So the tree exercise, I think a better way to see how it worked for me was what I wrote in the book. And I had a client, he was stressed out, and she didn't want to come into my office. And I said, all right, I'll meet you out into the park. I'll meet you there. And so I took her into the park. I had her lean her back up against the park. I'm sorry, lean her back up against the tree. And in a tree awareness breathing technique, when you connect yourself to a tree and it's intentional, that it will ground you, because remember, it has roots. It's already into earth and it has no negative vibrations. It's pure. And there's a lot of parts of the tree that actually we as humans have in our body. So when we lean up against it and we start to breathe and we go in a certain circular motion, we will feel grounded 5 to 10 minutes. On the recording they can get, not only do I have the guided imagery for you to go there and feel grounded, I have hemisync in the background. I have binaural beats in the background, meaning put headphones on and you're going to be transported to another place, another dimension.
Do you know who Corey Allen is?
No, I don't.
So he does the binaural beats too. He was on my show earlier this season. And so that's how I got familiar with that. So that's really cool. I just wanted to like mention that because I love that you're incorporating multiple modalities. And it reminds me of the saying, if you should spend, it says you should spend 20 minutes a day in nature, unless you're really busy,
Mhm.
then you should spend an hour.
Yes. Well, one thing about the tree exercise, if you remember in the book, I talk about if you're in an office and you have to look out the window, your body doesn't discern time, space, or reality. So if you look at a tree, it could be your hypnotic cue to ground yourself. It doesn't matter. I mean, I prefer you do it outside, but this is exercise I would do with clients if they were overstimulated, they have been in traffic, and it always works within 10 minutes. And then we're able to work. So other people listen to this. It doesn't have to be for trauma. It could be just like, oh my God, I'm going to go into this business meeting and I don't want to botch it. And I've been in traffic and I don't feel very grounded. Do this exercise.
Love it.
The collective release ceremony, that is pretty powerful. And so to share how this really works, I'll share my story. My I have a couple brothers. One of my brothers never healed his relationship. Got it. If he hears this, oh well. With both my parents are dead now, but with my mother. And what was interesting is that there was a point in my life where I was always trying to impress my parents to, when I got the doctorate, they didn't really care. It was just they really wanted me to be happy. But there was always still kind of like, not like this cohesive peer type of relationship. I can't explain it. And it was because I was in the way with my thoughts. And that is, a mother and dad should be a certain way I didn't get this type of parenting like my other friends did. Like I went and all of us, have an idea of the perfect parent. And unless you're a parent, you might not understand this. It's really hard to be everything to your child. And particularly if a parent is really young and he or she has emotions and he or she is trying to work out their shit, then there's a possible chance that, you can get caught up in their process as well. So and so a lot of people will project that they didn't have a baby. Therefore, that's the problems in their life. It could be that they're not where they're supposed to be in life, and that's the problem. Or it's that they never had a father that told them, I love you. Or it's like you saw the list. I try to bring up the most that come up in my coaching. And those, I think there's like 24 of them. If you get to, a lot of people will have that one belief, this is the one thing that had kept me from my happiness my entire life. People will live their entire lives with this one belief that they'll never be loved because dad never told them that they love him or her. That's crazy. So the collective release is to let go of these attachments that we have had onto our parents, our grandparents, to society's demands. You know what I mean? And when we're able to do that, then we can start living our own life authentically. So
Yeah.
when that happened, I did that release, particularly with the one where I did the process with my mother. My mother and I became closer. Like my mother too wanted to be seen beyond the mother who failed or didn't communicate as well as I preferred. My mother wanted to be seen as she was now, no differently than us adults now. Like we want to be seen for who we become now. My parents wanted the same thing. And what was happening is that they can feel like I had maybe resentment. I had expectations that they could never fulfill. When I let that go, I was fully present with their humanness, their spirit, and their love. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And one of the things that's so great in your book is that you give robust examples so that there's in multiple categories so that there's bound to be something. And that makes a lot of sense how you just explain it, like that you pulled things that you see it the most consistently across all of your 6,000 or 20,000 coaching sessions that you said you've done. So that you are seeing these common things, and most likely people are going to find something in there that resonates with them and go, oh, okay, that's where, this fear of accepting or receiving love is coming from, right? And breaking that down. So thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you for your time. This was a really lovely, lovely chat. So many good resources, tools, information. I will link all of your stuff in the show notes so that people can come find you, find your resources, find your book, and just continue to learn from your wealth of knowledge and information.
I really appreciate you, and I already sent you the red flags PDF
I love it.
while we were on this share, and I'll share also the two links to the videos if people just want to go right directly to them.
Perfect.
So
Thank you so much.
thank you.